His creation, the 16th of September 2024. This game story is that the player is put in the shoes of a homeless man in Brooklyn, New York. He is left to wander off with no purpose and no significant motive except to guard the train station and trains for a couple of peanuts. Had it not been a game, I would have taken the sample out of it to use it somehow. It seems intriguing. While playing the game, I had a thought. What game would I make? I don't know whether the player is homeless because he is playing video games and anticipating a similar life ahead of him, or he is homeless because he is what he does. It seems as though it would be a naming by function methodology. I would take notes, but it would be distracting sometimes despite them being a very sophisticated method. I do not think that I would be able to keep up with multiple interpretations rather than definitive rationalization. In other words, I would rather think of it as a probability than to think of it as a highly unlikely event to happen. If a player thinks that they are not likely to be homeless but they are choosing to play the game for the aesthetic that the game provides, then it is akin to saying that you are just here for the show rather than the moral of the story. If a player plays the role of a person whose life story had already been turned into a disaster by having been compelled to live on the streets or spend their time guarding unimportant objects for a bunch of peanuts, then it would be logical that the player himself would need to perceive the experience from the eyes or the perspective of someone who had been homeless in order to understand it. We can only perceive things from another person's perspective once everything that we have becomes of equal value, that we surely have something else that we value over. In other words, if everything has a similar value to you and you put these things that you categorize as everything under certain things when it comes to their value, it is important to see the name from the perspective of someone who had gone through the experience of being homeless. It should not just be taken for enjoyment. That's like saying that the people who dwell in subways and are homeless in the sense that they have no money nor shelter, no food nor water in extreme cases. It is not the same, but homelessness has the same effect on people who have a soft heart who believe they have a reaction towards what governments ought to do. Sometimes, upon knowing how some feelings would feel, it is necessary that these feelings be changed somehow. When someone had endured torture for a long time, they need some time to recover from the trauma of torture. Similarly, when someone had been exposed to certain types of feelings for long periods of time, it is no wonder that they would require some time to lose those feelings. Only time. This is like assigning categories by acknowledging them. It is like having the knowledge to acknowledge a certain fact or past incidents, yet having the precision to disregard it and move on. I'm entirely grateful that we would not be able to remember memories when we are being questioned and held accountable for our sins. It would be normal to hear certain phrases being thrown here and there. Not knowing where someone would be in the timeline is an instigator for swaying from the right path. However, would anyone be able to provide insight in a matter that cannot be reached by already decreed and determined binding promises? In other words, if certain things were told specific things, and other things told other things that are also equivalent to what the other group was told, should there be a medium in between who would be able to bring justice to each faction without being a part of many of them? I don't understand this. What if by conceptualizing the world we are setting up a limitation for the world itself? that by trying to identify the correct way to view the world, we are essentially making it more and more irrelevant because the world keeps changing. What happens if he makes a mistake? The whole thing crumbled, for good reasons. Isn't that what was meant by him knowing his creation? Anonymity has to be perceived in a manner that reshapes it back to its original categorization. Isn't this the key to obscurity? And I can go on. That attitude. Should it be the case that taking the situation lightly cannot be tolerated? If tolerance is an abundance, then it seems allowed. There has to be a need to identify the most significant and important object in a specific action. It is the aim of the message of the narration or the testimony. It is the object of focus for which a person is held accountable. The conveyor of meaning and the reason for existence. The obsession makes it imperative to attempt to be specific, or having arrived at the closest understanding possible given the circumstances. It is like being aware that obscurity is only used to reason a reason for behavior, like saying hey from behind one's breath, or a distant idea of collapse that only leaves one alive. It is the double-edginess of the concept that makes it a blessing. Nothing is comparable to his creation. The 25th of September, 2024. Have you heard that there are Iranian individuals who are buying houses in our hometown? Yes, there are many. But they are buying the houses with their money. The issue seems to be about why Iranian individuals are given access to the city. This is similar to what had happened previously to the Safavids before the Ottoman Empire's collapse. If Iranians buy the houses, why should that be alarming? The Jews are also buying houses in the holy city. Have you heard about Husseyniyat? How they are changing the city into a Shia city, doing Shia rituals, which is opposed by the original inhabitants. Mourning becomes a ritual, which is not done primarily because of mourning, but because it identifies the group. Many people say that Shia are not Muslim. It is an innovation, and therefore it's an addition to Islam that is not from Islam, and therefore it is no wonder that God can see everything, since everything is His creation. The people of disbelief aren't capable of belief. It is not they aren't capable of belief, it is that they are not allowed belief. It is like God would not have them inhabit His heaven because He dislikes them. This is why arrogance and pride are sinful, because they would require sheer will to change that about themselves, but they would not even decide to change out of their will. It is not they aren't capable of belief, they are capable of belief if they wanted to. Upon reading Creation of the Soul, I said the soul is not created. It cannot even reproduce. Why did you?